Now there's 0. No, here they are. Okay. Yeah.
All right, are we ready to go?
I need to pull up the agenda and the documents because I just got here. So one,
Sure. And Clay needed a second, so.
okay, sorry everybody. Here we go. Did everybody get a chance to look at the agenda? Okay. Um, did anybody let's move to look at the minutes from our September meeting. Um, did everybody have a chance to review those? And are there any amendments you would like to make to those minutes? Okay.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Great. Let's move to comments from
Do a quick vote. Just for the minute.
Chair Cortez, will you call a vote on that motion?
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Can I move to move to vote on the minutes approval?
Mr. Chair, I think we should just move there unless there's any objection to that.
Can I get a vote all in favor for the approval for the September meeting minutes? Okay. Looks like we're unanimous.
Yeah, this is Josh. I think I have to abstain because I wasn't on the board in September. I don't know.
Correct. One abstention. Clay, do you have any comments from Police Commission?
Yes. If we have another, I do, and I just want to be organized. If we have another liaison commentary, I guess we don't. We don't have it. Okay, I will go. It's great. I can do this. This month is easy because it was last week. We talked we talked for a while about automatic license plate readers, which is a policy that has been sort of on hold for the police commission to look at while the community discusses, while the community discusses pros and cons about automated license plate readers, and while city council made a vote last week on, I think, October 8th, to hold off and actually shut down is what they asked the city manager to do, existing automated license plate readers, while the community has this broader discussion. I'm not sure if anyone in the auditor's office or if anyone else knows if the city manager has reported back on that, but I know that she was investigating whether that was possible, contract language, all this other stuff. So police commission is in this place where there's a policy related to that technology, policy 1204, and the police commission wanted to make sure that because these are in existence, because at the time they were they have been used and they are on, and we didn't know if they were going to continue to be used as a tool in the police department. We wanted to make sure that the policy was enacted and voted on by the police commission. So we thought that the policy includes a lot of really good language about, protecting data that should only be shared for effective law enforcement reasons, and that it's, I think all of us on police commission sort of felt like the police department is doing what it can to be responsible with that technology, and the questions from the community about ownership of that technology are sort of broader than the police department policy. So we voted in favor of that policy to enact it, and then we will revisit it when we know more about the usage of that technology in the police department as that comes to light. We also started talking about this policy, officer response to calls, policy 416, but we tabled that until our next meeting, and we will see revisions from the police department on that the next go around, and it's mostly just an update to an existing policy that includes, sort of administrative changes and then some updates based on practice. We've gotten a lot of public comment at police commission for the past few months related to automated license plate readers. So I would say that that has been the primary focus of discussion, and how the police commission fits into that realm of discussion about, the work of the police department. And really, we came to the conclusion that we are looking at the policy related to that technology, and so that's what we did. We voted on that specific policy. And I think in an ongoing way, different police commissioners have different viewpoints about what the mission of the police commission is as like a theoretical subject. We're all clear on the language in the charter, but like as a theoretical subject, is the police commission also an opportunity to have community discussions about policing in our community? And I think that's an ongoing conversation with the chief and with the commission. So it's an interesting conversation that happened like in the middle of police commission, if anyone wants to go back and watch that video, just because the chief chimed in and there was sort of points from commissioners on all sides of the question, and all respectful and all sort of productive, and just trying to figure out what the role is. That's it.
Thank you, Clay. Did you see earlier today the city manager decided to put pause on flock cameras, using them?
I did not see. So that would be an implementation of city council's directive then. And so I guess the city manager must have uncovered that was possible with contract language. That's my assumption.
But if I can give you an update, at the city council meeting
Yeah.
last night, they discussed the city manager came on and said she's going to pause it within 24 hours. So that's what's being commented. They also did discuss the role of commissioners a little bit. So we may want to jump onto the city council Zoom record and go back, and you'll catch some of that discussion. But they're definitely something that they're looking at, but that is the current status. And they're talking about getting another work session at some point to resume the discussion from previous.
Thank you, Greg. Do we have thank you also, Clay. Thank you for joining us, Rick. Glad you could make it. Nice to see you in person and, kind of fumble the ball
On the door a
together.
bit, but it didn't help.
Elise or Brittany, would you like to offer any opening comments today?
None for me.
Okay, great. Thank you. At this point, I would like to invite Officer Griffith for a community service officer training.
Actually, it's not Owen or John.
Excuse me.
We had someone lined up, but something's come up and he's not available. So let's go ahead and move to topic 5.
Take
which
us
will be
away, Rob.
me. Yep, if y'all are ready, here we go. I'll share my screen. All right. Can y'all see that all right? Okay. So we're going to review 3 of the case summaries where people requested review. So they're in order from the information that that y'all received. So for case summary number 1, let's see if the slideshow will work since I don't have the owl. Okay. So summary of facts. So in May of 2025, the reporting party, who we'll call the RP, complained the Eugene Police Department mishandled his or her property and a shotgun was improperly destroyed. It's classified as a service complaint, and the RP's complaint was reviewed by members of the Independent Police Auditor's Office. The review of the incident determined no policy violations were made by Eugene PD, and the RP's shotgun had not been destroyed, and the complaint was dismissed. The RP received instructions from the auditor's office for retrieval of his or her property. And these are brief. So here's the information that we shared with y'all. And then I will stop sharing and we will discuss it and then we can go to the next one. So take it away.
Lindsay, could you give us a reminder on how to stage this discussion for this specific conversation?
Yeah, so for these, when community members have requested that you all look at the intake process when they're dissatisfied just with that part and it doesn't go all the way through to like an allegation of misconduct and adjudication. In the past, you all have just done like one round of conversation about the intake. If you saw any deficiencies or points that you would like to critique about the auditor's process in terms of like intake and the disposition of the intake, or if you want to comment on any like agreement or disagreement you had with our like thought process. And that's pretty much how we've done it in the past, because there's really kind of only one point of discussion. It's intake and classification, and in this case, then dismissal. So we've just done that kind of in one round in the past, if everyone's comfortable with that.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lindsay. I guess I'll start us off and say that I don't have any thing to say or anything different other than what the interim police auditor found here. And we'll go round robin, circle as it appears on my screen. So Elise, you're next.
I didn't have anything on this RP and the intake and the dismissal ultimately. And although, just to confirm, information went to RP regarding the process at issue, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Nothing further.
It was explained of how to retrieve the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Clay?
Yeah, I don't have any additional comments.
Thank you. Brittany?
Yeah, same, no comment.
Rick?
I have no comment either. That's it.
Thank you. All right. Shall we move to the next one, Rob?
Yep. Give me 1 second. So summary number 2. So in May of 2025, the RP complained Eugene Police Department failed to respond to a break-in at his or her residence in late 2024. It's classified as a service complaint, and the RP's complaint was reviewed by members of the auditor's office. The incident was not identifiable, and the complaint was dismissed. And then here's the materials that we share with y'all. And then I will stop sharing and mute and let y'all take it away again.
All right. Elise, you'll start us off this round.
So the only thing I had was why my understanding is 60 days from the incident is the kind of time bar. And so why was this also time barred, not just wasn't noted in the materials that we have.
So.
I
Rob,
can't
Rob,
you're
hear.
muted.
you're
How about now? Okay,
Better.
so in a situation like this, we would generally review it, even if it's not timely. But this incident wasn't identifiable, so there were no calls to the comm center. There was nothing.
I have nothing
It's
else to
also-
add.
Just like one other small thing. So it depends on the classification, the final classification, whether it's a 60-day window or a 6-month window. So sometimes we don't know which category it's gonna fall into, so we review it anyway.
Understood. I have nothing else to add. The intake and classification seem appropriate.
Yeah, I agree with Elise, and nothing else to add.
Can you remind me, so there was a third one and that one was dismissed due to missing the time window, or this one, that third one was? And then this one was because there was nothing actually found. Okay, so no comment on this one then. Thank you.
No comment.
Also no comment.
All right, give me 1 second. I'll bring the third one up. So in August 2025, the RP complained the Eugene Police Department mishandled an investigation and made improper arrests. It's classified as a service complaint, and the RP's complaint was reviewed by members of the auditor's office. The review of the incident determined the complaint was not timely, and the complaint was dismissed. I'll let y'all take it away.
All right, Clay.
Yeah, so this is about timeliness and that the incident occurred, was it 2 years? No, not that long. Was it 2 years? Anyway, it was longer than 6 months prior to the complaint to the auditor's office. And yeah, it's tough because I think there's lots to look into in a lot of different scenarios. And, there was a lot that we had available to us to review, lots of videos of the incident, lots of, statements from a variety of people, but it's just that timeliness is sort of this factor that that is mandatory for the auditor's office to respect based on the, is it the charter that, no, it's the ordinance, excuse me, the ordinance that defined the role of the auditor's office. And so I guess I was hoping that either Lindsay or Auditor Renetsky or Rob, if you all can remind us how that time limit came to be and why it was considered important, and just to reiterate why that is. And therefore, first of all, it's in the ordinance, so you have to follow the rules of the ordinance. But second of all, it'd be helpful for the community, I think, to know why.
So I can't speak for what was in the council's mind when they wrote it, obviously. But just speaking from a legal background, most cases and legal issues all have statutes of limitation for crimes, for bringing civil lawsuits. So I imagine when they negotiated with the police union and the police department and they got all those things together, everybody wanted a cap on it so they weren't reviewing cases from 5 years ago, a year ago, and somewhere along the line they settled on that number. Lindsay, if you have anything you can add from your time when it was being written, that would be great.
So I didn't have a front row seat to that particular point in history. However, there is a provision in the ordinance, this language, it says, except for good cause. So there is a provision in there in an extraordinary circumstance that it could be reviewed outside of these very strict timeliness. I don't think that I've ever seen that used. So I think it's a high bar to meet, but there is something in there. It's part of the reason why if we can find the materials, we review it anyway. right? It is in theory possible someone sent something that, and they have a compelling reason, a compelling for good cause reason that they didn't submit it in a timely fashion. And we have access, like you said, you could see the things that we had access to. So we had access to all the things and could look at them, but in the end determined that it wasn't timely. I think if I'm remembering correctly, this case is one of sort of it wasn't uncommon in terms of when people have gone through a court process of some kind and they've received materials as part of the discovery process. Oftentimes, by the time they get that material, it's beyond our timeliness windows. So by the time they kind of become aware or aggrieved about certain things, they sometimes it's a long time after timeliness has expired. And so that is not an unheard of situation. I can think of a couple cases where they've come to us and haven't been timely for those reasons, and this would be one of them. But yeah, that's as far as I know from the beginning of the ordinance, this particular part of the ordinance I don't think has been amended. So it's been in place for like, 12 or 13 years at this point.
That's all I needed to hear. I think it's just helpful to understand the context. I know Rick has his hand raised, so I'm
Rick?
happy.
Yeah, the only reason I raised my hand was that, excuse my phone in the background here, it'll go off in a second. There, it did. I think that the reason for all statutes of limitations and timelines on these is because of the problem of remembering things. And witnesses forget things. The accuracy of the description of the witnesses goes down. Many of the witnesses in this particular case were intoxicated at the time of the event, and so their accuracy is even affected even more. And so I think that's the reason for the social policy for the legislation of that type for statutes of limitations, and I think it's important to note that for the community.
Go ahead, Clay.
Oh, well, that is what I was asking for. Thank you for that response. Just in terms of clarification for the community to understand the reasoning for that sort of portion of the ordinance. I do think, I wonder if there's ways, for citizens who have that as a result, for all the reasons that we all listed, to also have some sort of like conversation about the issue with, I guess, someone in the auditor's office, or I'm not sure what the mechanism would be for that. I don't really have an outcome for that, but I think it's a hard part of, if it's 6 months and a day beyond when the incident took place and you suddenly have information that makes you want to file a complaint, just, it's a hard element of the community engagement aspect of this work. So
Oregon casebooks are filled with cases that involve 1 day after the statute of limitations.
Right. Yeah.
And the reason for the problem that Lindsay has described with people going to court and running out of time for the report to the auditor's office is that I believe, my own personal view, that they've had their day in court. They don't need any more discussion about it. They had an opportunity to prove that they're innocent or guilty, or the prosecution had the proper opportunity to prove that they're guilty. If they got off, now they're mad at the police for investigating it wrong. Tough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Timeliness is something that has come up over my memory is about 10 years of last 10 years. So the ad hoc committee for police reform, it was one of the recommendations that be revisited, and the mechanism for changing it would be council, right? They're the ones who get to determine that. It would probably also be something that the union would have to agree to, I would imagine. So there are ways for people to make their desire for change, if they should so want to. Those would be kind of the paths to go.
And Clay, I'm happy to add, for good cause, it would perhaps be, let's say someone's in the hospital, so they can't report it. Let's say they're in the military and they're overseas. Those are the type of things that I've seen the courts generally find to be good cause. And none of those were present in this case, obviously.
Thanks.
Brittany?
Yeah, my only question is what the messaging is like. And I'll just admit I haven't gone onto the community facing page of the auditor's office, but just how it's communicated, especially to a citizen versus someone who's internal around that timeline, how they're notified of that. If Lindsay or Rob or Craig have any insight on what that looks like.
So they do get a letter that explains what happened on the case when the case is closed. They also, if they have questions, we've had a few people that will get that letter, they'll call up the office and ask for an explanation. I believe in this case, we actually even sent the language of the statute that showed specifically how what the limits were. Someone might have to pull that letter up or that communication up, but I believe we did that because they did question it. If I recall, this one was actually an individual that came to a meeting. So they did actually get some face-to-face time with members of the staff that I think also explained it. But yeah, generally, most of the communications, if they want it, it's available on the portal, they can see it, but they do get a letter that says what happened. And in these sorts of cases, it does spell it out.
I guess I'm asking before somebody files a complaint so that they're aware ahead of time what the time limit is before they use up their time, waste their time essentially.
Got it. That would be on the only place it's covered, quite frankly, I believe is on the website, and maybe some of the brochures. On the website, it'll talk about that. I've got the webpage open. I'd have to pull it up, but if you want to keep going, I will see if I can get the language off of our auditor's page.
Yeah, thank you. I assumed it was, and I can look myself too. My only thought with that and thinking about in my day job and as I'm working on community engagement around the healthcare system, just kind of continually wondering how to really fully equip and empower people to engage in an informed way. And this is not me questioning that that's not happening, but just wonder if there's any way around language or how the information is presented just to make sure folks are super clear before they engage the process.
So when the complaint comes in, if it's telephonic, they're generally told, look, we'll take a look at it, but this may be untimely. So it's kind of broken ahead of time.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. That was my only comment. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Brittany. Rick?
I don't have anything further.
Likewise. Elise?
Nothing
No.
further.
Is my internet connection kind of okay? You can understand me? All right. Okay. Well then, let us proceed on to our case review.
Do
Thank
that.
you, Rob.
Yep, give me 1 second. Okay. All right, here we go. So we have a case review. There's only one allegation, this one, and it's regarding professionalism. So here are the summary of the facts. So in May of 2025, 4 officers responded 2 times to a suicidal subject's, who we'll call the suspect and suspect's request for aid. During the first response, the suspect told the officers he or she was not suicidal and did not intend to inflict harm. The suspect possessed a nitrous oxide container, and the officers observed him or her repeatedly inhale the gas. During the first interaction, the suspect told the officers he or she had leg paralysis. Officer A used his or her foot and contacted the suspect's leg to determine if the paralysis assertion was true. After speaking to the suspect, the officers cleared the call. The officers responded a second time because the suspect reported that he or she had cut his or her wrist with a knife. Officer A located a knife near the suspect, removed it, and pretended to throw the knife into a field. And note, officers determined the suspect had not cut his or her wrist. The suspect was taken into custody and placed on a mental health hold at Riverbend Hospital. In Police Officer A's internal affairs interview, he or she was questioned about the interactions with the suspect. Officer A acknowledged the fake throw of the knife was ineffective and explained and justified the other actions he or she made during the interactions with the suspect. So this resulted in one allegation, professionalism, that Officer A engaged in disrespectful conduct and did not provide courteous service when responding to a suicidal subject in May of 2025. And then here are the recommendations. So auditor's office recommended sustain, chain of command, and the chief. Final adjudication was within policy. And I won't read all these, but here are the issues for y'all to discuss and noteworthy. So under adjudication recommendations, chain of command, we're all within policy. And then here are the materials that we provided y'all. And that's my last slide. So I will stop sharing and let y'all take it away.
All right. If I'm remembering correctly, we start with Clay this round. Okay, so we'll in this round we'll do some general comments and complaint intake, classification, and monitoring.
My general comments are that this, I think, one thing that we review is incidents that aren't overly egregious, just to sort of maybe talk about the culture of the police department. And I think this is one of those cases where there's some disagreement between the adjudications as to what is professional and what is not professional. And I think that, that's an interesting conversation to have. And I think we'll probably have some disagreements amongst this board too. I think the other thing that we see a lot of is how the police interact with individuals who are experiencing a lot of challenging circumstances. And, one of the last things that I read in this report is that the reporting party has since passed away, and like pretty soon after the complaint was filed. And the interactions, you could, it's someone who's experiencing a lot of challenges in their life, and then the police department, is called in to sort of support that person. And it's a mixture of like needing to deal with sort of therapy, and there wasn't so much a fear of harm to others, but fear of harm for that individual. And so I just want to acknowledge that the police are responding to calls that are vast and vastly different from one another, and dealing with sort of human behavior that is, wide ranging. And that this person who they responded to was experiencing a lot of, personal challenges that obviously somehow resulted in a person's death soon after. So in terms of the intake, classification, and monitoring, I think it all appears above board and very thorough, and that the question and complaint classification that the auditor's office determined, I think, were appropriate for this case. So that's all.
Thanks, Clay. Brittany?
Yeah, my general comment is that as a state and a country, we need to invest in mental health services so we can have a fully staffed mobile crisis team, CAHOOTS, whichever version. and we have the mechanisms and the services available. This individual was, I believe they stated at one time that's what they were requesting, and police had to respond because we are not 24/7 with those services, and that's because of staffing, that it's too difficult to staff these positions that are really difficult work for very little pay. So I have, my general comment is my little mental health soapbox. And it's so frustrating to see that our system really resorts to having to treat someone navigating a mental health distress as someone who's potentially engaging in criminal behavior. And that's not a dig at police. That's just the options that are provided when that's the response. And that's really disappointing. For the intake and classification, I just had a question, and I'm not at all familiar with any of the specific policies, but I know that judgment has come up in previous cases we've reviewed, and I'm assuming that's like a much higher stakes situation, but can someone remind me like when judgment is used, just to understand why that wasn't here?
So I think I was the one who classified this, if I remember. When looking at the classifications, judgment would be another thing that we could look at. In general, I try to read through and see the one that I think matches most closely. So judgment and professionalism often could be, you could go either way. I don't think, in my mind, I don't think of them hierarchically. Those two particular outcomes in terms of discipline aren't likely to be wildly different between those two things. So I don't think of them, it's in the ones that I think of more hierarchically would be like a truthfulness, for example, or insubordination. Those I think of a little bit more hierarchically, but between judgment and professionalism, really, it's just kind of more like the art versus science of making the deciding which one seems like it is the best fit to describe the moment. But I totally agree that judgment is another one that you could say did poor judgment lead to a behavior, or is it the behavior itself was unprofessional? Both things can be true. So I think that's a good point.
Cool. Thank you for that. That's helpful, Lindsay. Those are my only comments. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your comment, Brittany, and Clay also, that this is not one of the like I'm trying to find the right descriptor that's not dehumanizing of the work of policing or any of the folks, but like something like this is not like one of the like a sexy case in terms, I can't think of a different word right now, more appropriate one, that is going to be, yeah, it's a lower key case that feels like the stakes are just as high. Thank you, Rick.
I don't have any problem with the classification. I would disagree that judgment is a proper one for it, because you're getting into someone's subjective viewpoint, and you're really causing a problem there, because you're really questioning what the subjective motive of the police officer was at the time. I suppose that the same justification would be for this case was given in the case already by the officer. But I wondered why they didn't arrest him for having an inhalant and using an illegal drug while running right in front of him. But maybe the officers could comment on that.
Please.
There it is. Okay, sorry, I was muted. I am not familiar with that. So yeah, I think I can't answer for the officers necessarily, right? But I know at times when I've been in situations, I was a crisis negotiator for about, I think, 6 years. And at times there are, you weigh the cost and benefit ratio, right? So initially he's saying that it's not a gas, but it's filled with something else. Maybe it's oxygen, I think is what his claim was. They're estimating whether or not that's true. And at times, sometimes it's more appropriate to arrest somebody for a crime, and other times it's more appropriate to get them to behavioral health so that they can be evaluated for potentially a longer life. And it seems to me that the officers just kind of tried to gauge what they understood he was really doing with the likelihood of him being a harm to himself, and what's going to be best for him in the end. So I think the ultimate decision to take him to the behavioral health unit was because maybe that was more appropriate help for him for what he's going through versus an arrest, which, I mean, the jail does have staff and a nurse on hand that could assist with some of those things, but maybe behavioral health would give him maybe more of a reason, since both of his calls were for suicide help. I don't know if I think I said the same thing probably 8 times, so I apologize if I'm rambling.
No, I appreciate your thought, and I think that that's probably true, that the mental health hold was probably an appropriate way to handle this individual. But it struck me that it was just a blatant bit of law violation in front of the officers, and it was almost like he was intentionally doing it to stick it to the officers. And I thought that overall that I'll get into it a little bit more, but I thought that they handled it appropriately, and I thought their attempt to use humor was appropriate, and they played with him with a laser and everything else, and were appropriate in most ways with him. So
Thank you, Rick. Lindsay, if I could put you on the spot real quick, and ask you, had you thought about courtesy as a classification for this one?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think the answer would be the same as like, why not judgment? I think, kind of look through all of them and try to decide what seems the most appropriate. And I guess the question for me, like, is a feigned knife throw more discourteous or more unprofessional? I don't know. I think it could definitely go a lot of different ways, and all of them would be appropriate. I also, in general, tend to not list a lot of allegations for single incidents. So if there is more than one allegation, I tend to try to reference different discrete things that are happening. And in this case, I kind of focused in on one and wanted to level a single allegation. So in the end, went with professionalism, but you're totally right. Courtesy is another thing that could be looked at, I think, from a variety of angles.
Thank you. I think the only reason I asked is because as I was reading the courtesy policy, it mentioned something about respect. I don't know if the professionalism doesn't necessarily, but that stuck out to me. Anyway, that's what seemed to be going on here for me. Is that for a long time, the officers there were matching their level of jovialness. It was yeah, I feel like what I saw was that there were 4 officers there who were doing a pretty good job trying to keep it pretty chill in a situation with, I mean, I know this has been the case, but that's a shocking size of gas canister. And this to me also read as somebody who is reaching out for connection. It's just heartbreaking to see stuff like that. And yeah, for a long time, I feel like the officers were matching the energy in a way that was dignifying. And I think that it was, yeah, classified appropriately. Elise?
Yeah, I'll just start off a question to follow up on what Rick asked the officers. in a hypothetical world where the officer went the other way and said, "Oh yeah, that's an indolent," wouldn't we basically be looking at a ticket on unlawful possession of indolence?
It's, excuse me, it's still a criminal offense, so it's still lodgeable. You can still take him to jail for that, so it'd be officer discretion. I think they would use, kind of as Sergeant Jensen mentioned, they would use their discretion if they can't articulate a need for a police officer hold, and they still feel like this guy's a danger, like maybe the jail in this case, if we have probable cause for a crime, is the best spot for him. If we get him to jail, then at least we can hopefully reach out to mental health and let them know from the jail, like, hey, this guy was inhaling toxic vapors. And it may be something we take him to the jail. And they have a pretty stringent screening protocol there. And they ask us, why is this guy here? And we say, well, he was inhaling from this giant can of nitrous. And the jail may say, okay, take him to the hospital first. If that answers. Yeah.
It does. Thank you. And then, oh, go ahead, Sergeant Jensen. Sorry.
I was saying, further from Rick's question, and something I kind of failed to mention was, I think inhaling toxic vapors is a Class C misdemeanor, and so depending on the number of jail beds that are available at the time, it could be something where they have him just kind of check in and then he leaves, and then he's ready to, do something worse, or so that's another consideration, I think, as an officer, that I would have taken into account had I been in that situation, is what the longevity is for somebody likely being held on something that's less than a criminal trespass 2, which we respond to very regularly.
Thank you for that. I agree with what everybody said. I mean, this case is an interesting one. As we were discussing the actual classification, it's interesting. I was really reading into it, and professionalism of I'm looking at the policy says that they'll always provide courteous service. So professionalism incorporates this courteous service idea. Another thing that it hasn't been mentioned a lot, that I think kind of I thought a lot about in doing the case review on this, was that this takes place over 2 different interactions between the officers and the subject. And it's so the interaction 1 and interaction 2 are so different. And, as I was listening to the calls that are coming in to dispatch and the kind of the information that they're getting, it just, it's hard to imagine, hard for me to put myself in the shoes of the officers there, in terms of just like the whiplash that they must have been feeling in terms of the different information on the ground versus what they were getting from dispatch. And I played into my thought process as I was reviewing this. I agreed with the professionalism classification. I think I tend to kind of agree with Lindsay's perspective of picking the one that fits the most. If it's a one incident kind of activity, that makes sense to me. It helps me at least narrow my kind of analysis to less nitpicking whether or not it fits into a particular category here or there, but thinking about kind of the conduct and where that lands for me.
Right. Thank you, Elise. For our next round of discussion, we will focus our discussion on relevant department policies, practices, and policy training considerations. And we'll start with Brittany for this round.
Yeah, I was wanting to be reminded as far as suicide prevention and suicide intervention training. Is that happen in CIT? I'm assuming it does. And does it happen elsewhere or more often than that? Since I assume it's a more common call in the spectrum of mental health related calls that you all get.
Yeah, so it is brought up and mentioned in the CIT training, which we do, I think, 40 hours, and then we do, I think, 2 hours each year annually, in addition, and it is brought up each of those times as well. So it's definitely an annual training that we receive.
So every officer receives the suicide prevention piece specifically every year. Is that
I actually believe it is mandatory for us to receive
Yeah.
that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate hearing that and just wanted to verify. I appreciated and understood the approach of humor and rapport and trust building and how that was kind of articulated through the interviews to explain the rationale for that approach. I didn't see that the officer that's being accused here was behaving any differently than the other 3 officers that were there in that regard either. My only kind of question, and it was just a like little slip of a comment, and as we talk about every month, the officers are human beings, so I can appreciate that, but just the comment of questioning or saying, implying that the individual was pretending to commit suicide or pretending to threaten suicide or something like that. So fine line on how you engage and build rapport and match or mirror, as Jose was referencing, to actually then like dismissing or kind of giving an outlet or a way to diminish the actual risk that could have been at hand. That was my only comment. And I don't, again, I should read the judgment policy before I even bring it up, but I just was curious, like that felt like a slip and a lack of judgment on choosing to say that rather than intentionally or maliciously trying to be not discourteous or unprofessional. Just like, that was not maybe the best thing to, it felt like it indicated that the officers were kind of frustrated and fed up a little bit with the person, and so then question a little bit of their intent in that sense, I guess. So it's not anything I think to train on, and I appreciate hearing that there's consistent training around suicide prevention, since there's a lot of actual strategy to that. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Rick?
I don't find any problem with any of the policies in place. I think I differ with what Brittany said a little bit, because I think she's maybe judging him on whether the officer should be a trained psychologist as opposed to a police officer. I think you have to look at the police officer as a police officer, and that police officer does have a certain amount of training for suicide situations. But in judging someone's judgment on an issue of whether someone is being appropriate psychologically, I think you ought to make sure that you're keeping to what a reasonable police officer should do under the circumstances, not what a reasonable psychologist should do. And I think maybe a psychologist might have a different viewpoint on it, but I'll leave it at that.
Can I just offer one point of clarification, since Rick addressed me specifically? I just want to clarify that in suicide prevention training, it's for the average person. It's not for anyone with a mental health degree. We in mental health absolutely are trained in that and have to utilize it often, but it's really in layman's terms. And so if I had gone so far as to say, like, gosh, you need to review the training or the policies because this officer really, crossed the line with what they said, certainly that might be holding the officer to a different standard. And I absolutely recognize that our law enforcement is not trained or should be responding to mental health calls. I was just kind of calling out that may have kind of contributed to the dynamic, and could be something worth paying attention to, but totally appreciate how the officer handled it and what their scope and role is. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Did you have more to add, Rick? Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess to think with that discussion, I would like to believe that our our officers have I do believe that our officers um, have a common sense understanding of courtesy and respect and, dignity. At the same time, knowing that that officers do a different job than I do, and a job that's often, I think I've acknowledged this before, activating their central nervous systems and fight or flight responses. And, the context for this is that this was out in a field. Is that, or like a lot or something? Can any of y'all like add a bit of that if I?
Yeah, he was facing a field, but he was pretty close to the road, and he was sitting on one of those barriers. So it's kind of in the Bethel Triangle area.
I think right across the street were houses.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, to ground this, I don't know if there are any department policies, practices, or policy training considerations that are that need to be amended or changed or looked at right now. I think it looks to me like we're dealing with a kind of like isolated incident. And I mean, yeah, I've got to bring it back to how I opened this comment. I guess my belief or assumption is that officers at EPD would know that that would be something that would, if not hurt somebody's feelings, contribute to a already, I don't know, I think visible mental health crisis. So, yeah, again, I don't think there's anything in terms of policies or training considerations. Elise?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. I don't really have much else to add. We've kind of talked relevant policy considerations. As always, I'm happy to hear officers get training. I think it's important. In fact, I think it's a DPSST requirement, so I'm sure it will continue into the future. And so that's good. I think this to me really is, it hammers home where Brittany started around like there are other competencies that officers might not have in the same way that crisis mental health responders might. And this is a really good example of that. I think all of these officers were doing their best, and they're just, officers are trained to do law enforcement. That's number one goal of any officer. And at the end of the day, sometimes you need not law enforcement. And I think this is an example of that.
Clay, thank you, Elise.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of training, so I'm reading this one sentence from the very thorough IA report, which includes interviews and includes an interview with Officer A. This is Officer A, correct? And it says, I asked Officer A if they felt they provided courteous service to the reporting party. And Officer A stated after they learned how the person they were interacting with reacted, they did not think that they provided courteous service. So what I'm responding to there is like a reflection on the officer's part of like, oh yeah, what I did didn't really work. I understood like in the moment, and maybe now as I'm reflecting back on it, that I could read the room. And for me, that's the most important thing here is like that that's the kind of training opportunity that I'm really happy to see, that someone's reflective of their, behavior in a workplace. And I was thinking about, Jose, you brought up your own job, and I'll do that with a sort of analogy because my job is way lower stakes, but I teach students. So it's a very highly regulated environment also. And, there's lots of rules that we play by with that relationship. And at the end of every kind of class that I teach, we have interviews with students one-on-one. And this summer, I had 2 interviews in a row where the students cried. for a variety of reasons. And then the third person came in, and to like make light of this with the students, I said something like I have 100% batting rate with crying, so good luck to the student who was coming in. And it was like a joke, and it was funny to the student who was coming in, but the student who was leaving heard it. And that wasn't the intention. So there was this like moment after that where I was like, I'm using humor to try and make this an easier scenario for this person. And then I realized in the moment that that was a bad thing to do. And what I would want out of that as an employee of an organization is like an opportunity to talk about it and think about like, how am I going to do that better next time? And so I'm not sure that there is like a training that results from a sustained allegation that is a good outcome. Instead, like just the conversation about the event, I think is a good training outcome, and how that gets incorporated in a broader way to the police department from these events, because they're dynamic. They are all different. There's going to be 4 different people there at the next one who might have a different relationship with the person that they interact with. And so just being able to have those conversations and reflect back on those incidents and, you know, talk to each other as an organization, I think is really valuable. So that's the kind of training that I hope this inspires, or like this kind of incident encourages within the department. And I will also hope to have training on how to better use humor with my students. And I don't find any issue with the policy or practices as they stand.
All right, thank you, Clay. That's a really helpful analogy to think about that. I appreciate you sharing that. Rick, you're gonna start us out with a round of adjudication recommendations.
Okay, I agree that it's within policy. I thought it was interesting that first thing I did when I saw this case was I looked up the effects of inhalants such as nitrous oxide. And one of the significant side effects is a weakness in the legs. And for that reason, I thought it was legitimate for the officer to tap the leg to see whether or not there was actually paralysis, or whether it was just a weakness, or what he felt was a weakness. I think he expressed himself by saying that the legs felt like sandbags or something like that, cement bags. And that could be directly as a result of the extensive use of inhalants. And I've never seen a whippet that's 3 feet long, like they're 2.5 feet long, like that one was. Most of them are about 2 inches long. And it was amazing to me that was going on, and it wasn't just, grabbed from him or something. I had a problem with that, but anyway, I agree that it's within policy. I'll leave it at that.
Brittany, did we skip you on the last round?
I think I went first, maybe. I got to share.
Okay. You changed on the order on my screen when you raised your hand. It put you up at the top left. So I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that if I did.
You're good.
Would you go next on adjudication
Yeah.
recommendations,
Yes,
please?
I can do that. I would say within policy.
Thank you. I guess one of the things that we didn't really talk about here was also the knife throw. And I think that that's where I would agree with the auditor's office in terms of a sustained reading. As others have mentioned, officer acknowledged that move was not effective, and that this had a negative effect on the interaction. So rather than judging the intent, I agree with the auditor based upon what I saw. Elise?
Yeah, I actually think I agree with the throwing of the knife is the much more complex thing for me to analyze in going through this. The nudging the leg, I mean, it was described initially as kicking. To me, like reviewing the video, it was pretty minor. I think it was important, as the officer said. It's also, you know, there's a real risk of getting down there and touching it with your hand or something else. You know, I wouldn't necessarily want to be at eye level with somebody's kicking field. On the knife, it's, you know, it's been referenced that the officer in the interview was just asked straight up, "Do you think that was courteous service?" And the officer A says, "Well, you know, in hindsight, no. Basically, in the moment, I realized once I tried to do it that it didn't work." And that's, I've really been going back and forth on that because I'm on one hand, kind of the to me, I don't think if the action was professional at the outset, I don't know that it necessarily should be less professional if it doesn't end up working. If you know, if it was this careful, reasoned discretion that the professionalism standard talks about, and it just like sometimes discretion goes the wrong way. You know, sometimes you make the wrong choice, but it was reasonable in the moment. Especially given this like two interaction piece, but then to hear the officer say, "No, I don't think it was courteous." I really went back and forth for a while, and ultimately, I think after the discussion today, I'm going to end up on within policy on for both of the actions.
Can I just clarify
Thank you,
one?
Elise.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Can I clarify one question? It seemed like there's one allegation in the auditor's letter, and maybe also the other adjudication sort of split it up into analyzing two instances, but it's still just one allegation. Is that true? Okay. Yeah, so the way that I've been commenting has been reflective of the knife throw in addition to previous actions by the officers on site. So those comments sort of still stand with that context. I think, yeah, I in this case want to look at the like totality of circumstances and the progression of events, and especially the fact that there was sort of one rapport that was built on one call that was then like kind of completely different on the second time that the officers were called out. And so I have to assume that, you know, the officers who responded the second time were sort of building off of, and this is sort of stated in some of the interviews too, were building off of this assumption of how they were going to interact with this person on the ground that they had previously, you know, interacted with. And once realizing that sort of rapport and I don't know, playfulness didn't work, they started to switch gears and work in a sort of different manner. And because of that, I think that's actually, I mean, I totally agree with Elise that like if you read it letter to the law, you know, the officers thought it was discourteous, and like I think the action, you know, if they paused a minute and sort of thought a little bit further down the line of the actions, then maybe they would have not done it in the moment they were thinking about how to be totally courteous. But I don't know. I want to look at the totality of circumstances and think about the overall response that all four officers provided, and including the officer in question. And I think that that is within policy as a whole. And so it is sort of on the fine line, but I'd rather have the conversation without a sustained allegation, I think, because I don't think that that's really necessary in this case. I think I'm the last one. I was the last one.
Oh, Jose has dropped off. Maybe because we just finished up, I guess I'll keep moving us along until he gets back. And well, I guess we are at a break. So if we want to take 5 and be back at 6, let's do 6:50.
Thank you. let us continue. The floor is yours, Craig, for the auditor's report.
Thanks. So good evening. As everybody probably has heard by now, most of the people in this room, I started on August 20th, and September was a very busy month. So to start the month of September, we started examining the ICE case, which we had put on the website that talked a little bit about since it was a case of public interest. Eventually, after reviewing all the relevant ordinances, the body warns, the dispatch, we came to the conclusion that there were no violations there, nothing to move forward on, and we closed out that case. But we had a second issue that we had to address, and it hadn't been presented to us yet, but it is dealing with the flock cameras. There were some discussions during the work groups and the city meetings during the way that they may want some oversight from this office in that area. So we started to examine what best practices would look like if we went down that path. As everybody, or at least the word I'm trying to spread is we don't make policy. We don't decide where the cameras go up or anything like that. But if we are directed to engage in oversight, we need to be prepared to do that. So we did that as well. The other big focus for me in September in the office has been outreach. Working with Beatrice, we have been trying to spread the word as to what the auditor's office is all about. One of the things we did, I think that actually is going to fall into October, but it is kind of examples of what we do, is we talked to the local public radio station, and that was KLCC. I did an interview with On the Record, or Oregon On the Record, where we talked about the fact that if somebody wants to file a complaint or make a compliment about police work on what Eugene Police Department does, that the auditor's office is the forum for that. So we did a lot of outreach. We were also present at the Fiesta Festival. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. I've got my notes here. Let me take a quick peek. So yeah, we were at the Fiesta event, which was great. Fiesta Cultural, we had representatives at the YMCA welcoming. I think the one I was at was the Aloha Festival. That may have fallen in September or October, or maybe even August. Time is flying. Also done a lot of outreach to various community groups, and also doing a lot of time meeting with people from this group, some members of the police commission, some of the counselors. So it's been a lot of meeting and outreach, which is what I'm going to continue to focus on. And that will hopefully get the word out more about what the office does. We did some interviews also with local news organizations. So it's really been a lot of those sorts of activities. On the complaint and commendation section, we've been taking in a number of cases. I think if I look at my notes here correctly, we had, and before I get to that, most importantly, you will be having a new member. Yesterday, the council voted to fill the one vacancy. A little detail. The process itself was part of why I was doing a lot of outreach. We actually got an amazing 18 applications for one spot. I mean, that's the kind of admissions record that gets you into an Ivy League college. It's really competitive. So definitely everybody on this group should be proud of the work they're doing. And I think it shows that how many people are interested in joining you to do that work. But yesterday at the council, they did, in the consent agenda, approve them. So you'll be getting a new member, perhaps by your next meeting as well. We got 45 complaints over the month of September. I'm anticipating, and I'm just going to say it right, those numbers are going to increase. I'm saying that because I'm hoping they're going to increase because of our outreach. I don't think that is going to be reflective on any poor conduct or any great conduct on behalf of the police department. I think the more the people understand what this office does, we're going to see more activity with people coming in with complaints. So again, it won't be reflective on the police department, but it is reflective on the outreach that we're doing. As they noted, we also had 9 reportable uses of force that we looked at, and that overall complaints continue to be up since 2024. So that's a trend that we are hoping to continue due to people knowing what we do. And that'll also, I think, when we do those meetings, we do it, if people are aware of it, we'll be getting those complaints earlier. So we'll run into hopefully less of those issues that we've encountered with the statutes. Other than that, I'm open up to any questions about what the office has been up to. All right, back to you, Jose.
Thank you, Craig.
Oh, I'm sorry, my video was off for that, wasn't it? I apologize.
Um, do we have anybody in audience for public comment? I don't believe we do. We are going to move to closing comments. And we're going to start off. My order's all off again since I joined up again. So we're going to start off this time with Elise.
I don't have a lot to add other than what we said. I did appreciate the opportunity to look at those service level complaints that got closed before, you know, really going through the full process. I think that, to me, that feels good. It came out the same way as the auditor's office. I enjoyed that process. I as folks in the future, if anyone's ever interested in that, I'd be interested in continuing that practice.
Thank you, Elise. Brittany?
Just want to express my appreciation and say that it's really validating and cool to hear of the interest in filling that position and how many applicants there were. And just to share that this work continues to feel really meaningful. So thanks for allowing us to be here.
Thank you. Clay?
Yeah, ditto what Brittany said. One thing, I guess, I'm not sure if this is an admin thing to think about for next time, but it seemed like the virtual meeting, I'm not sure how we got info on the virtual meeting. I read it in the email today, and like I was on the fence of whether I was going to be in person, so I wanted to make sure where things were happening, but I don't know if we can get an email from, like, that's only directly saying we are only having a virtual meeting the next time that happens. I'm not sure what the reason was, and that doesn't really matter. It's totally fine, but just so that we have the chair and Rick here on time so we all know it's happening. Otherwise, yeah, super great. Thanks for providing a system that I think really works for our community, and it's important that for the community to know that we're looking at a ton of details into the police department, and it's clear that there's lots of review and oversight about how our police officers are working in the community, and that from my vantage point, it seems like we have a really good police department doing a lot of good work, and it's great to also be talking about how it can continue to improve. So thanks.
Thank you, Clay. I think that this was a brain fart on my part. I can't speak for Rick, of course. Not saying also that you don't have brain farts, Rick, but this was one of mine. Can I invite you, Joshua, to introduce yourself and hop in on the conversation?
Sure. Thank you so much. Please call me Josh. I am that person alluded to who is voted in by the city council. So I am very honored. As you may know, most of you, I think I've met already. I've been attending a few meetings over the course of the year. And Craig, it's good to meet you in person or virtually, I guess, at this point. I also had met with both of your predecessors just to kind of get a sense of what, and some staff actually too, to get a sense of what the group does. And a quick thing on my back, and I don't know how many of you read the applications and all that, but I want to say one thing. I've learned a lot from you, just all of you in this meeting and the last few months when I've set in, over the time. And one thing that I think may be interesting going forward for all of you, I'll share about myself, is in high school and law school, which is long ago now, but I worked in this area, and it was in New York City, working on helping people file complaints to the Civilian Complaint Review Board that they had there. And in college in Boston, I helped draft legislation, which did not go anywhere, but to establish such a board. So that's quite a while ago. And I've done other things in my life. Most importantly, I have 3 kids who are now 18, 19, and 22, which is why I'm kind of gotten back interested in doing something like this. And in my work life, I'm the Human Resources Director at Lane Council of Governments, but that's a different story too. But I've also, in my 17 years here in Eugene, gotten to know a lot of officers and had a lot of discussions with a lot of people from all spectrums of everything. And I just feel like things are so much more nuanced, and it's a hard place here to be an officer, to be law enforcement, but also we need to make sure people are accountable. And I will say one other thing I bring to the table, if I may, and I don't want to go on so long, but is I don't have the lived experience that a lot of people do based on just how I present. Middle class, middle-aged white man. But I feel like I've done enough learning and listening, and then through friends and colleagues and other things I have been involved with in my lifetime, plus those things I mentioned at the very beginning back long ago, that I can bring something to the table. So I hope that as we continue conversations over the next months and years, that I can fulfill that. But I'm really eager to work with all of you. So thank you for allowing me a few minutes to talk about myself, which really is not what you asked, but well, maybe it is, but I kind of want to give a little background of why I am here. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I could probably speak on behalf of everybody and say I'm glad to know more about you and looking forward to meet you in person. All right, Rick.
Yeah, welcome Josh and welcome Craig to the new bench that you occupy. And I'm happy to see that Josh is already participating. That's wonderful. I'm happy to see you. Take care.
Thank you to Officers Jensen and Griffith for your time. Really appreciate your investment in this kind of work, and glad to collaborate and make relationships with you in this way. Thank you. I would also like to say welcome to Josh, and thank you to Amanda, Beatrice, Lindsay, Rob, and Craig for running a great ship that I'm happy to be a part of. Okay, that's it. I don't have a gavel. We're done. See you all next month.